Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to the RotoPros pre-lock show for Saturday night. I'm just sitting here watching this Jordan Zimmerman dominant performance against the Royals, which is as good of a reminder as any that baseball can be very, very random, as can any sport. But putting that aside, I guess it's always just worth remembering how random things can be. For tonight, I think pitching is pretty difficult because there are a lot of good choices. And hitting is a lot easier because there aren't as many good choices. And I think a few that are very, very strong where it's going to be pretty easy to narrow the focus offensively. Pitching-wise, it's going to be a little bit harder. So I'll just kind of outline the few options that I think make the most sense. So let's see. Starting with the top. All right, just waiting for things to load. All right, we've got Kenta Maeda and Charlie Morton as the two most expensive pitchers tonight. I don't think I have any interest in either guy. The issue for Maeda is just his price. Like he cost $9,700 the last time he was facing the Padres. That was a road game. This price now is up to $11,400, so it's a big increase. And I thought he was kind of a fringe play, just maybe a decent play then. This game is also being played in Mexico, and I think the park there, well, it definitely has a pretty decent elevation, so it could be a fairly strong hitter's park. But the issue for Maeda is just this price. Like he should do well, but I think he's probably only has a decent chance to hit value, nothing crazy. I think there is some upside, but the Padres offense is bad. Maeda is probably better than people think. He has the strikeout upside. I think it's just a lot to pay for him, though. The other expensive pitcher here is Charlie Morton. And Morton is facing the Diamondbacks on the road. And after what Garrett Cole did last night, I think a lot of people are going to be on Charlie Morton. I'm personally not. And I think it's a bit of a tougher matchup than people think. Steven Souza is back for the Diamondbacks. So that's a really big boost to their offense because Souza – well, one, he's a good hitter. He also hits righties better than he hits lefties. And he's such a big upgrade over the guys that were playing instead of him, like Gerard Dyson or, I don't know, Devin Marrero. I'm not sure who else. They've been running a bunch of guys out there. But Souza is a massive upgrade over the bad players that were filling in for him. And it's just kind of an expensive price for Morton on the road. I think Morton's a good pitcher. I think there are comparable pitchers to him, though, that are much cheaper and probably have similar to slightly better matchups. In terms of the park for Morton, it's kind of hard to say because the roof is closed tonight, but it's still Arizona. We still don't really know how much this humidor is affecting fly balls. So Morton has upside. He is coming off a huge game against the Yankees, but I just don't really think it's that favorable of a spot for him, and I think we can go a bit cheaper and fit in some pricier hitters because there is a lot of value offensively. So I guess it can be a little contradictory. I guess I'll summarize it like this. The pitchers I like are in the mid to high end, and if you use just two of those guys kind of priced in that like 7 to 10K range, then it makes it kind of just work to fit in some mid to high priced offense. So I guess I'll get to those pitchers now, the ones that I actually want to use. I think the best value on the slate in the mid to high tier is probably Eduardo Rodriguez in Texas. I don't have a lot of conviction here. There are just a few guys that I think are pretty good bets for their price. So Rodriguez at 8,800, I think for his strikeout upside, that's a little too cheap. The Texas offense can be a tough matchup. They're very boom or bust, though. There's a lot of strikeouts in that lineup. And then some of the other choices, we have Tyler Mahle against the Marlins. Mahle has actually been really, really good this year. He was a fairly well-regarded prospect, but his huge strikeout rate actually does come with a pretty significant swinging strike percentage. So I'll just give those specific numbers here. But the Marlins are probably the worst offense in baseball. They're pretty bad against right-handed pitching, but they're just bad against everybody. And Mahle is averaging 10.3 Ks per nine, 3 walks per nine this year. He does put the ball in the air, and I think he can be homer prone. But the swinging strike percentage at 11%, I think his K rate probably is close to sustainable. This is just a really favorable matchup. So Rodriguez, Mahle, Jameson Taillon facing the Brewers on the road, I think he's worth mixing in too. He's just kind of underpriced. And if we liked Nick Kingham in Milwaukee last night at 6,800, Tyone's probably a better pitcher than Kingham. So I think it's a better spot for Tyone than it is for Kingham. But the choices are a little bit different tonight, so I do kind of want to mix it around a bit. Tyone is just one of the guys that I have interest in. I think his price is a little too cheap, and he was someone who was priced over 11,000 just 2 or 3 weeks ago. He's had a few bad starts recently, and honestly, I don't know why he's pitched poorly. Like, it would be nice to have a reason for why Tyone has struggled his last few starts. There really isn't anything that stands out. The one thing that is true about Tyone, and I'll double check this, is that he's significantly worse against lefties. So let me just make sure that that's the case, because this is just kind of from memory here. And the Brewers do have mostly right-handed batters tonight. Ryan Braun is sitting again. So Tyone this year, let's see. I think he strangely has been reverse splits this year compared to regular splits last year. No, that's just in terms of ERA. So Tyone, 7.9 Ks per 9 and 4.5 walks per 9 against lefties, but he's at 8.6 Ks per 9 and 0.6 walks per 9 against righties. He's just given up more runs to righties. I think a lot of that is fluky, though. But looking at this Brewers lineup, the lefties really to be concerned about, it's just Christian Yelich and Travis Shaw. Eric Sogard is batting 8th, and then you have the pitcher batting tonight. So it's 6 righties, including a pitcher. I think Sogard is a bad enough hitter that we don't have to worry much about him. So in terms of the righty-lefty splits, this sets up really well for Tyone. The Brewers strike out a lot. They're missing Ryan Braun. They're missing Eric Thames. So I like Tyone a decent amount, and just kind of talking myself into it here. I think he could be my highest-owned pitcher. Probably him or Rodriguez. I think Molly is the third option. And then the other guy I kind of like here is Zach Greinke. So he's going opposite Charlie Morton. The game is pretty close to pick 'em. The Astros are slight favorites, and it looks like there's maybe a little of a bias on Houston. But the over-under for the game has dropped substantially from 8.5 to 7.5, and I think that's because the roof is closed. So that is a boost to Morton, but again, I think he's a little bit too expensive. Greinke's cheaper at 9,500. He's been really good at home in recent memory, and his swinging strike percentage this year is actually a career high, despite the fact that he's throwing slower. He's just done a better job of commanding and just mixing up his pitches more. He's at 10.5 Ks per 9 and 1 walk per 9. So that 4.50 ERA is kind of just a mirage. He's giving up a little bit more hard contact, but I think most of it is bad luck. So Greinke is my 4th favorite pitcher. I think I'd rank them Tyone, Rodriguez, Molly, Greinke in order of exposure. I'm going to be leaving off the expensive guys like Morton and Kenta Maeda. There's one other pitcher that I'm considering, and I just don't know if the salary savings are necessary enough to use him. But Lance Lynn gets a really favorable matchup against the White Sox. Lynn is as strong of a splits pitcher as really anybody in baseball. He's very bad against lefties, and he's good against righties. And Yohan Moncada is out of the lineup tonight, so that's a switch hitter batting from the left side he doesn't have to face. But it does kind of look like the White Sox are trying to load up as many left-handers against him as they can. So Lurie Garcia hitting leadoff as a switch hitter. Yolmer Sanchez is a switch hitter batting second. They have Nicky Delmonico, Daniel Palka. Wellington Castillo is in there over Omar Narvaez. That's probably worse for Lynn, even though Castillo is right-handed just because he's so much better of a hitter than Omar Narvaez. But Lynn's really cheap, and the White Sox do strike out a ton. They're missing Moncada. They're missing Avisail Garcia. Matt Davidson's out of the lineup tonight. So I think Lynn is okay. There's definitely risk there. The wind's blowing out a little bit, and Lynn has just been so volatile this year. He's striking out almost a batter per inning, over a batter per inning, but he's also walking almost a batter per inning. So I just it's a lot of risk. But I think when we get to offense, Lynn will make more sense too, because he does correlate with the Twins offense, and that is one of the best spots of the night. So I would maybe include Lynn in like 1, 2, 3 lineups. But he's a pretty distant choice for me behind the other 4 guys I mentioned. Question about Trevor Cahill. I think Cahill is just a little expensive. Like his output is probably lower than the other guys like Rodriguez and Tyone and Greinke. He's not as good of a pitcher as any of those guys. And even though the Orioles do strike out a lot, their offense is getting a bit better. They have Mark Trumbo back now. And the wind is expected to be blowing out a bit in Oakland, but Cahill just simply, I don't think, is as good as those other pitchers. He's very boomer bust, though, so I don't hate the idea of taking a flyer on him. I'm just pulling up his numbers because he wasn't really someone I considered initially. He's been good again this year, 9.5 Ks per 9, 2.5 walks per 9, 3 starts, good ground ball rate over 55%. He does actually make some sense, just kind of looking at the line movement here for an indication. Sharp money is a little bit on the over for this game. I guess that's sort of – it's pretty mild, though. It's just hard to know how much to buy into Cahill's success so far this year, because the only other period of success he's had in his career was the first half of last season. The second half of last season, he was just awful. And this could just be a 3-start sample where he's gotten a bit lucky. His matchups have also been pretty favorable, I think. So he's faced the White Sox, Rangers, and actually the Astros in his other start. So maybe only a slightly favorable schedule. I guess Cahill's okay. I think he just is slightly behind the other pitchers like Rodriguez, Tyone, Greinke, and even Tyler Mahle, I think, is better. I don't think Greg is watching, but in Slack, I see there. We share the same opinion. Cahill is probably just a little bit behind some of the other mid-price options, and he's an okay pick. I just think I prefer other guys. So let's get to offense, and I think there really are only 2 teams I have heavy interest in stacking. So it's the Twins facing Hector Santiago, and I'll pull this up again because I always look at it, and I think it's a reason the Twins could have kind of suppressed ownership. So the Twins have a lot of lefties, and Hector Santiago is a lefty, and I think a lot of times people just won't roster left-handed hitters against left-handed pitching because they just assume that left-handed hitters can't hit left-handed pitching. Santiago has one of the biggest reverse splits profiles of anyone. I mean, of anyone I've ever seen. So this year he is striking out a batter per inning against lefties. He's walking a batter per inning against lefties. The numbers from last year, for anyone who listens to this regularly, I'm sure you've heard me mention what Santiago's numbers were against lefties last season, but I'm just going to do it anyway because it's kind of just fun to look at. These are just really horrifying statistics that he had last year against left-handed batters. So on the surface, 8 1/3 innings against lefties last year seems like a very small sample, but he faced 58 batters in those 8 1/3 innings because he gave up 17 earned runs in just 8 innings. He gave up 6 home runs and walked 10 guys and only struck out 7. So that equates to a 478 batting average against lefties last year. It's a 15.16 FIP and a 9.21 xFIP. He gave up almost a home run per inning pitched and more than a walk per inning pitched. So it's kind of reasonable to expect that Santiago will be bad against lefties because he's bad all the time against everybody. But he had these crazy splits last year where he was worse against lefties. He has been worse against lefties so far this season. For his career, the splits aren't as pronounced. He was a little bit better when he was younger. But even still for his career, he is striking out about 7.9 batters per 9 innings against lefties or righties. But the walks are actually higher against lefties. And the reason for this is that he heavily relies on his changeup, and pitchers who heavily rely on changeups tend to have reverse splits. Santiago is as extreme of an example as there is in baseball. So the Twins have lefties in their lineup. They have Joe Mauer, Logan Morrison, Eddie Rosario, Max Kepler. I think all of those guys are still strong targets despite the fact that they're left-handed. They may only be my second favorite stack in terms of output, but for pricing, they're really cheap. Just kind of go through here. So Mauer is actually leading off today, 3,500. Dozier, 4,300. Kepler, 35. Escobar, 38. Rosario, 39. Like everyone on the team besides Dozier is below 4,000, and some of them are even in the low threes. I think Mitch Garver's fine to use at 3,100. I think Morrison, 3,300 is a good play. So there's a lot of value on the Twins, and it is a hitter's environment tonight with the wind helping a bit in Chicago. So I'm not only targeting the lefties because of these Santiago splits. He's bad against everybody. Don't get me wrong on that one. But I think the fact that he has these splits in his profile just means that you don't have to be scared to roster left-handed batters against him. I think it's completely fine to do that. And if the Twins do well, they should knock him out of the game pretty early and face some very poor quality relievers. So I'm not at all concerned about the lefty-lefty splits against Hector Santiago. But the offense, I think, should score the most runs tonight, and I'm not sure how my exposure will break down yet between them and Minnesota, is the Dodgers. So this game is being played in Mexico, and like I mentioned with Maeda, there is some altitude here that should create not quite the same effect, but a lesser version of the Coors Field effect. We didn't really see it in practice last night because Walker Buehler just pitched so well. It was a 4-0 game, and Joey Lucchesi is a good pitcher too. And I guess it was raining last night a bit, so it might have kept the hitting down a little bit. Maybe it was hurting the batter's ability to see the ball. I'm not exactly sure, but elevation does create more jumping off the bat from fly balls. And Brian Mitchell is really, really bad. He has walked more guys than he struck out this year. And the Dodgers offense, even though it doesn't have Corey Seager, still has plenty of good hitters. So Chris Taylor is priced at 3,800. Bellinger's 42. Grandal's 38. The Dodgers are really cheap tonight. And Alex Verdugo in the 2-hole at 3,200. He's kind of fallen off a bit as a prospect. He was one of the most highly regarded prospects in baseball just a few years ago. His AAA numbers have kind of come back to earth in the last year or two. And now he's up in the majors. I guess the Dodgers need some depth right now. Puig's hurt. Seager's hurt. So I'm just getting Verdugo's numbers here. He only had a 96 WRC plus in AAA to start this season, but the sample was just 81 plate appearances. He had a 118 WRC plus in AAA last year. I think Verdugo might be just a slightly below average hitter, but he has a decently fantasy-friendly game. He has power and speed, so he could be a better fantasy player than real-life player. I think it's okay to make stacks without him because you can play Matt Kemp at 5 in the order. You can use Jock Peterson batting 6th. I think it's worth having a lot of exposure to the Dodgers. So that could be the offense I end up having the most because I'll definitely be trying to plug them in twin stacks, especially Grandal because there aren't too many catchers that are in great situations tonight. And Bellinger too. The issue with Bellinger, though, is that Mauer and Morrison also both play first. But using Bellinger wherever you can, I think makes sense. Wherever it's not a twin stack or even in some twin stacks where you leave off the first baseman. So those really are the main priorities that I have for offense, the Twins and the Dodgers. The other offenses to mention, well, I don't have too much interest in stacking them, even though it is Steven Matz, the Rockies in New York. The Rockies offense just isn't very good, but I do like Arenado and Story as plugs, especially Arenado because third base just kind of seems to be a position that fits well when building lineups so far. Both the Twins and Dodgers, you can leave off the third base spot. Max Muncy is the 8-hitter for the Dodgers. He's their third baseman. And then the third baseman for the Twins is Eduardo Escobar, but you can play him at shortstop also. So Arenado just kind of fits in. I'll probably have him as a plug a good amount. Other offenses to mention, Verdugo is well regarded. He just hasn't had the numbers in the high minors, and he hasn't really produced that well in the majors. Although he is doing, I guess I should mention, he's hit well this year in the 6 games that he's played. Same amount of walks as strikeouts. He hasn't hit a homer yet, but he's batting .381. Some of that looks to be pretty inflated by his .421 batting average on balls in play. But he has hit well in the majors so far. So maybe he's going to be good this year. Either way, though, it's a really good situation in the batting order for him, and he's cheap. So I like him even if he's not a good hitter. But the other offenses that I am kind of looking at here, I definitely like the Pirates lefties against Jhoulys Chacín, who also has pretty pronounced righty-lefty splits. And Chacín also just isn't very good. It's a hitter's park in Milwaukee. So Frazier, Polanco, Bell, Dickerson, I think are all really good plays. I think you can use Marte if it's a stack. I probably wouldn't use Marte as a plug, but for a Pirates stack, which I think I'll use in just a few combinations, Marte is the least preferred of the first 5 hitters, but I think he's fine if it's a stack. Frazier, Polanco, Dickerson, Bell, though, I think are all good plugs. And of those guys, I think I'll have Polanco and Dickerson the most because Frazier doesn't have outfield eligibility anymore. and Brian Dozier plays second base. So I'm going to have way more Dozier than Adam Frazier, but you can more easily fit Polanco and Dickerson with 3 outfield spots. So the Pirates, I think, are probably my third favorite offense, depending on the lineup build. So if you need a cheaper stack, the Pirates are my third favorite. For a more expensive stack, I think the Red Sox are my third favorite. So I view those teams kind of similarly depending on what fits. The Red Sox are just really expensive, but it's a hitter's environment in Texas. I think Cole Hamels is pretty bad, and the Red Sox have some righties that are definitely worth at least plugging in. So I like Mookie Betts, especially JD Martinez, maybe Xander Bogaerts if you have the salary. But I don't think I'm heavily targeting the Red Sox as a stack just because of their prices. If they happen to fit into lineups, though, I think that they're fine. So that's probably it. I think the Angels-Mariners game is kind of worth fading. I think both pitchers are a bit underrated. I think you could target offense in the Orioles-A's game, but I think, again, both pitchers are underrated in that game too, Gausman and Cahill. Even though I don't have interest in rostering them, I don't think they're as bad as people think they are. So Matt Joyce is a plug if he's leading off again at 3,000. I think is a good play from that game. I don't have any other interest, but yeah, I think that's pretty much going to do it. So I'll just recap here. I guess there's one more game to mention just because it's notable to be fading it. The Braves are really, really expensive against Ty Blach, and it's a good matchup. Their prices are just so high. So again, like the Red Sox, if they fit, if you want to plug them in, I think that that's worth doing. But I think it's just the expected output for the Dodgers is higher and they're way cheaper. I think the expected output for the Twins is higher and they're way cheaper. So the Braves are just too pricey. I think they're going to be pretty chalky. So I don't have much interest in the Braves, but if you end up with 4,800 for a final roster spot, you can put Acuna in there. I think Albies too, but I prefer Dozier even if it leaves salary on the table. I think Dozier outscores Albies tonight. So Acuna probably will be the only Braves player I end up using. And then Gregor Blanco is cheap leading off for the Giants, but we probably don't need the savings to use him. So that side of the game is probably a fade too. So the Giants and Braves could be popular, but I think there are just better picks tonight. So yeah, I'll just recap here. We're at 5:40, give you guys some time for lineups. My favorite pitchers on the slate are Taillon, Rodriguez, Greinke, and Molly. I'll probably kind of just have them all about 50%. I think it makes sense to kind of diversify pitching, especially if you're going to have a narrow focus on offense. So I'm going to have just a mix of those 4 guys. I think maybe a little bit of Lance Lynn and a little bit of Trevor Cahill. Those would be my number 5 and 6 guys. I'm convinced a little bit on Cahill. It just depends how thin you want to spread yourself. But I think Cahill makes for a decent next option. And then for offense, it's the Dodgers and Twins. Those are the priorities. I'll probably have them about the same amount, and then mix in a little bit of the Pirates and Red Sox. And that's pretty much going to be it. So I don't think we will have a show for tomorrow, but good luck tonight, everyone. And I think we'll be back on Monday. Keep you updated, though. And yeah, good luck again.